Good morning, everybody. Welcome again to Sunrise Daily. Today, I'm Chamberlain.
Yes, it's a beautiful Tuesday morning from here in Lagos. I am Kayode Okikili.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde.
It's even more beautiful here in the Federal Capital Territory. Yes, Abuja and the Federal Capital Territory. Good morning. I'm Maokpa Ogun Yusuf.
It's nice. Official. We're in a competition now.
Who has the best weather?
I think I'll give it to Abuja, really. I'm sorry, I have to give it to
just give it to the woman. You can't win that battle.
Oh, yeah?
The weather.
No, I think this is more about the weather. I think the nation's capital has,
the most serene.
When was the last time you were in Abuja?
Hey, I felt it the moment I stepped into Abuja that, you know what, I'm not going to go there this morning, but yeah, it's a beautiful morning.
Well, sometimes too, I mean, they complain that the traffic is catching up with them as well.
Is that traffic though?
They think, what's going on in Abuja? I thought it was supposed to be a lot calmer and serene, but sometimes there's traffic.
Is it the traffic?
And there's flooding sometimes. That's my question.
Maybe my question, you won't weigh in on that. Is it the traffic or the driving?
Add to that, everybody's a big man in Abuja.
Okay, Marco, you want to speak to that first of all?
Well, I think that the weather more than overcompensates. The terrain here in the Federal Capital Territory more than overcompensates for whatever hassles you go through. You know, sometimes when you're just driving and then you just see one imposing hill, or you just see the sun rising behind the hill, or something, you know, something that, or how will I put it now, or evoking, something that says, makes you say awesome. Because sometimes all you have to do is just take your head off the traffic and just look up. And you say, wow. I remember why I moved here in the very first place. I know why I moved here in the very first place. It more than compensates for it. I mean, all the big men that are, well, everybody's a big one, as I like to say. But yes, traffic is catching up with all of us in Abuja, especially on the outskirts. There's a whole report to that. But I can tell you that sometimes when you just raise your head from the traffic, you're able to, you know, remove your mind from it sometimes, or many times.
And I don't know if what they will say in other parts of the country as well. They will say they don't even have traffic at all.
Well,
I think everyone is grappling with their own type of traffic.
Their own terrain.
Yeah, so everybody has their own challenges.
And importantly too, you know, the question about planning. I guess the country needs to pay a lot more attention to planning and do things differently, so we can get results, because we keep doing the same things the same way. Cities are expanding, outskirts. We don't even take advantage of border communities, states, cooperation, but I guess a different matter for another day, I say. Well, let's go right into the dailies this morning. We start with Vanguard newspaper today. Many feared dead, injured. 3 villages sacked in Ebonyi. Well, they've got a host of riders, and it appears as though, would there be any day that you pick up any daily you don't get to see these kind of narratives? It's just mind-boggling, really. Yeah, houses burned as suspected assailants attack Ebonyi community, the first of the riders. Only 4 persons were killed, state government. They use the word only? Wow. We're yet to confirm whether they are herdsmen or Ajila people ascribed to Monarch. They were not herdsmen, Ebonyi government. I haven't seen my husband. My husband's brother was killed, victim. People sleeping had their heads chopped off, survivor. Southeast governors get knocks, commendations over Ibubagu. So, yeah, tough to imagine this kind of scenarios. And you keep asking yourself, look, this is 2021 and people still acting as though from the Stone Ages, the amount of things that, or the kind of things that you hear people fight for and kill people for. It's shocking, really. It is shocking. And so we just wonder. Well, it is the big lead story on the front page of Vanguard here today. So, yeah, that's what you find right there. I'm going to talk to the back page right away. Vanguard Sports, Edo promises spectacular closing ceremony. And fireworks as Bayern eye revenge against PSG. So several other sports stories, but that is Vanguard today.
Well, I think PSG may have just
sealed it.
Sealed it, I think.
Just one goal difference.
Well, it's buying anyway.
Well, you've got
Expect
3 away
anything.
goals.
But I think PSG has got this. But you know what? That'll be the interesting one. Take a look at Nigerian Tribune's front page rather, the lead story. It's a really sad one. Autumn apologizes as army buries 12 soldiers killed by bandits in Benue. I see the big picture on the front page shows the corpses of the 12 soldiers killed in Benue State during their burial just yesterday. It was a very emotional one. Very emotional one. And right next to that, you see Boko Haram activities triggered humanitarian crisis from 2014. That's credited to the federal government. Maps out 3 focal support areas. It's on page 3, and you could see just crowded right there are insecurity stories. But let's take some politics right under that one. You see Arakbaja floors Olafeso at PDP's Southwest Congress. You know, the build-up to this one seemed like it was going to be maybe violent. I mean, saw videos of supporters of one of the candidates, you know, throwing jabs and, you know, cussing at the other one. But it turns out it went peaceful. Good one. You see a breakdown of what exactly happened there. Just one more on the front page. We have not increased cement price in 15 months. Dangote Group says cement price cheaper in Nigeria than in Ghana, Zambia, others. Remember the talk about cement price in Nigeria compared to another country? Well, that's a response from lead cement manufacturer. That's the Nigerian Tribune for you.
The Daily Trust newspaper also opens with that the images is the first thing that you would probably catch your attention of the officers at the burial of the fallen military personnel at the military cemetery in Benue State yesterday. It's very, very heart-wrenching. May their souls rest in peace. And well, the lead story right there, as rainy season sets in, fertilizer scarcity, price hike, scare farmers. FEPSAN promises 1.5 million tons. Experts canvass for soil and crop-specific fertilizers. That sounds like a long shot, but then perhaps something to explore. A story you'll find on page 5. Right above that story, arms purchase probe. Chief of Army Staff reps bicker. The story is on page 37. Ramadan begins today. Subscribe to the Sultan. Find out the details on the inside pages. Airports on high alert over attack threats. That's on page 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Okay.
Let's look at New Telegraph for you. A number of stories on the front page. Federal government. That's a quote or something from the federal government. Criminal elements planning fresh attacks on airports. That's what they have on the front page. Not very reassuring, I must say. Page 3 might give you details. FAN probe source of memo leak. So apparently it was in a memo and it leaked. Well, maybe it was not for public consumption, because this certainly is not very reassuring. Criminal elements planning fresh attacks on airports is the lead story there. Some people sabotaging Buhari's government, that's according to Kalu, is also on the front page. State of the nation, Nigerians made religion a liability. That's from Bishop Kuka. Tasks northern governors to address the region's problems. South not helpless as in 1966. That's according to Afeni Ferry. I want to know what that is about. It's a page 2 read for you. A number of stories just beneath the nameplate. Jonathan 6 review of electoral system says ballot, not courts, should determine victory. It's a page 3 read. The politics for you. PDP Congress, Makinde, Fayose reconcile as Arakbaja defeats Olafeso by 13 votes. That's also there. U.S. watch list. I have no connection with Boko Haram. That's a Pantami. It trended most of yesterday, page 3 as well. And something on antitrusts, price fixing. Dangote clears air on arbitrary cement price allegation. Yes, that was also there. People comparing the price of cement in Nigeria to the price of cement in Zambia, where Dangote also has a cement factory, and how the government there has asked them to bring down the price of cement. So they're wondering what is going on. We're paying so much here, and this is the price in other countries. Well, Dangote has a response to that on the front page or inside the New Telegraph for you. That story on Army burying 12 slain officers in Benue is also there, and a really sad one to see. And Ramadan fasting has started. It's also on the front page of New Telegraph. Let's leave it there for the paper.
Well, the Guardian is an excellent. I mean, those trends yesterday, boy, they were all over the place. But look at the Guardian on their lead story. New Nigerian COVID strain jolts UK city after rise in cases. By the way, they're preparing that, who knows, by June for the Euros. They think that if you've got COVID passports, that, yeah, it will encourage a lot more people to attend it. But I hope that, could they be moving towards making it compulsory for everyone to get vaccinated?
I mean, I think it was, I think the head of the PTF one time that said, I mean, we're getting to that point. This might be inevitable eventually, whether you like it or not. If you say you can't travel with your yellow card, I mean, and that's for something that is not as rampant. It's just, I mean, in some countries here. Imagine COVID, that is worldwide.
Well, what about the flu shot? I mean, do they compel everybody to go get the flu shot?
I mean, with what we have seen
I don't know if
with
it's
the
going to be
vaccines.
that easy, though. I mean, it should be a choice. People should still have a right to take certain decisions.
The right
you can't take away that right.
There is a global health personnel, I think he works with WHO, who's been saying, look, yeah, I mean, it's something to think about, but where is the human rights element? You know, everyone should have a right to make such choices.
But let's forget what they say about human rights.
So just one thing, they also said that, look, should countries, it's not every country that is saying you must take a shot before you come into our country. So it depends on where both the originating country and the destination country. But then that element of choice, of
but even that notwithstanding, I mean, UN, I think I heard that comment where they said they don't have enough data to determine whether or not this vaccine actually sufficiently prevents transmission or being transferred from one person to the other. So based on that, they can't advise that any country or anyone makes it compulsory. And so they're just treading cautiously. And besides, on what grounds are we going to make it compulsory? We don't manufacture it. Well, we only depend on people who supply us.
But don't forget.
So if anything goes wrong there, we'll be at the mercy of those.
Oh, yes.
So, and largely, the same thing with different parts of developing countries. So who knows?
And that lead story that says new Nigerian COVID strain jolts UK city after rising cases. I think this COVID strain may have taken that, Nigeria's exports doing quite well too far. This is one export that we don't want to be doing well.
There's that city in Kent, where county where Nigerians. I guess if they see that, they will see it. But look at the writers. How pandemic opened up talents of Nigerian scientists by Buhari. Ramadan. WHO warns on possible surge in COVID-19 pandemic. 2% of 690 million COVID-19 vaccines administered in Africa. Africa CDC wants continent to produce 60% of its vaccine need. NPHCDA partners ICPC to ensure accountability in deployment, administration of vaccines. And then you see FAN raises concern over violation of COVID-19 protocol.
Did I say just 2% of 90 million vaccines?
2% of 690 million COVID-19 vaccines.
Hey, Africa's population is about 15% of the world. How come Africa is getting just 2%?
So there you go about that.
Dear.
Well, Africa produces its own children, but not its own vaccines.
So it's a big call, big wake-up call.
Hey,
If we don't do what we have to do, there you go. And so,
but isn't that the truth, Kay? I mean,
everyone produces their own children. Why do you have to just, personalize that? That's too loud.
They like hitting us below the belt. And then you see Southwest PDP closes ranks, vows to defeat APC. Fayose changes tactics, announces Makinde as Southwest PDP leader. Makinde's candidate, Arakwaja, defeats Olafeso as PDP zonal chairman. Fani Kaide, Bode George absence. Electoral committee disqualifies candidate for being overage. Oh yeah, you're scanning for that, right? But
how overage is that overage? Because I mean, they should be not too old to run, right?
Well,
if somebody
maybe
is
it's overage for the
60 or
youth
65 is contested for a youth leader, or 70,
See?
what does that say?
But I thought
Assuming that were the case.
Oh dear.
Assuming I'm not conceding.
Okay.
That's Guardian today. Anyway.
Yeah, that's just by the side. But take a look at Nigerian News Direct. The lead story: Pantami denies link with terrorists. Says criminals are feeling heat of NIN SIM verification. That's on page 2. That story trended also yesterday. It's interesting the things that trend on social media these days. But yeah, it caught on quite fast, and I mean, you saw different responses from different quarters. So this is one from the minister. I believe some others will be in the inside pages. So more details on page 2 of the newspaper. And the Speaker of the House of Representatives has something for those calling for LG autonomy, saying that it is not for the National Assembly to address. So you wonder who's meant to address that? Well, find more details on page 3. And well, that story about the PDP Zonal Congress, Arakwaja emerging the chairman of the party in that region. You see, this one from Jonathan: ballots and not courts should decide election winners. And let me just take this one. I mean, it's like a downer, really, because the resident doctors were saying, well, we hope that this strike will be the strike that ends all strikes. But guess what? Doctors threaten to resume strike in 4 weeks if demands are not met.
It was clear yesterday that it's not the strike that ends all strikes.
So why end the strike or suspend the strike?
It was suspended, not ended.
Yeah, they suspended to give the government, according to them, a chance to implement whatever policies they've got. But remember, I did put up that question about the fourth part of it, where they wanted certain things to be removed from the law. Can you amend the laws in 4 weeks?
I mean, you had bills that spent decades, almost decades.
Well, maybe it can be assured, at least a little bit of assurance, if the process begins. But then, how fast can the process go within 4 weeks?
Huge question. So I just worry that we might just see another strike.
Well, since they're dealing with politicians, will there be a political solution?
Okay. But don't forget, I mean, we're talking about lives of people here.
Yeah.
So it's on page 2 of Nigerian News Direct. Honestly, it's a lot to grapple with on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct, but let's leave it there.
Well, this one, I don't know what you make of it. After booting out 4,000 Kaduna LG workers, it's on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper, by the way. After booting out 4,000 Kaduna LG workers, El Rufai declares more civil servants to go. Yeah, just simmer a bit. And says, I wasn't elected just to pay salaries. And there is a statement accredited to him, I guess. COVID-19 measures have shown fewer workers needed. Retrenchment, frightening, crippling civil service, ascribed to a PDP chieftain. Governor underestimating power of workers, ascribed to the NLC. Stories on page 6.
Well, someday we'll probably have that conversation, really.
Around?
I mean, around the civil service, around the workforce, around, you know, productivity and what is being put in, around how to balance. I mean, you don't want to take food off the mouth of people, right? But you also need to ensure that your state or your business remains productive. So how do we ensure a balance at the end of the day?
And you don't want to give audience to that unemployment figures.
Exactly.
Which is huge, astronomical.
Exactly.
I mean, you saw the army of youths during the NSAS protest, different grades of idle hands. So,
and if they don't get employment legally, they'll always get another form of unemployment, which we have seen in insecurity.
And if the country doesn't change its approach, in fact, what about those who are underemployed? So they could also be used as coming further.
Huge. Underemployment, even more. That's what we have found. But you know, juxtapose this with what the former president said yesterday. We'll get into that when he said that, look, the local government system has failed, and we have to admit that it has failed. But is this increasing or making it better? I don't know. But right under the picture you see on the front page there is also about local governments. LG autonomy up to Nigerians, not National Assembly, ascribed to the Speaker, Bajabiamila. What exactly does that mean?
LG autonomy up to Nigerians?
Did you want to ask if Nigerians aren't in the National Assembly, or is that... I think the context is quite important, sir.
Context.
Are Nigerians the governors who remember at that time too, where they said that who judicial workers did protest? They were asking the governors to ensure independence, autonomy for judiciary, as a way to ensure that separation of power works. And if that happens, if different arms of government get a lot stronger, it strengthens democracy.
Oh, absolutely.
I think we need to take this conversation very, very seriously. Here's what he also says. 2/3 of states rejected autonomy, I guess, of local governments. That's one is right there. Governments will implement LG and judiciary autonomy, ascribed to Lalong. Find that story on page 15. So what exactly does this mean? I guess you want to pick up a copy of the Blueprint newspaper this morning.
I mean, let's just be honest here. Fingers are being pointed at state assemblies. So,
Who controls them?
oh yeah.
Who are they beholden to? Are they really independent?
All right, Mokwe. You're next.
Let's look at leadership for you. And they have this one. Production sharing contract. Government oil majors pass the buck over Nigeria's $62 billion cut. Whereabouts of money unknown after AGF Lami's 2019 demand letter. Page 4 will give you more about what the story is about. Production sharing contract is what it is about. You might want to know the full details. Nigerians besiege U.S. Embassy over communications minister's alleged link to Boko Haram. You might want to know what that is about. All inquiries referred to FBI, that's according to Embassy. Pantami denies, says, I will sue for defamation. You have details on page 4 of the paper. Slain army personnel buried amidst tears in Benue as Otom apologizes to coerce others is also there. And they also have this one, other stories that you've seen there. Ballot should decide election winners, not courts. And of course, Ramadan begins today. It's a page 11 read for you. Let's leave it there for leadership newspapers.
And then you see the Daily Times next. Criminals planning attacks on airports. That's a quote, so perhaps that leaked memo means if it's happened. Well, this is a criminals planning attacks on airports. But the previous one of the dailies, that was New Telegraph, they say fresh attacks. So there you go. It means it happened before, a fresh one or something. But you may just need to just go ahead and read it, and this could cause panic actually. But there you go. That is it with a look at some of the dailies here this morning. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. So to talk to us about the hows, the whys, and the wherefores, let's head to Abuja. Marpa.
Thank you, Chamberlain. We have with us this morning two gentlemen to do justice to this topic. We have Mazi Afamo Osigwe, who's a senior advocate of Nigeria. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thanks, Mokwe.
He's also a former General Secretary of the Nigerian Bar Association. And we also have with us Mr. Utum Eteng, who is a former member of Presidential Committee on Constitution and Electoral Review. That committee was headed by Senator Ken Namani. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigerians. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, you have heard the former president, and there is enough examples on the ground to buttress what it is that he's trying to point that he's trying to make. Some people will say they agree completely with the president, especially when we look at where we're copying our democracy from. the major example is the United States, and we saw what happened in the wake of the at the end of the elections when former President Donald Trump tried to take the matter to the courts. As much as possible, it would seem that they deferred back to the will of the people as expressed in the ballot boxes. Do you think that what the president is saying here is truly feasible here in Nigeria? What are your thoughts? Let me start with you, Mazi.
Well, I think from my understanding, the former president simply expressing a dissatisfaction with the involvement of the judiciary in the electoral process. But that would appear to be blaming the wrong person. And I thought he should have started with blaming the politicians who create the environment for the judiciary to get involved in the first place. And making reference to the United States example and trying to expect what obtains there to happen here is trying to compare apple with oranges. There they have a political culture and system and an electoral process that brings out an outcome that the people have confidence in. And that's not as much as one can say about our own electoral process. And then suggesting that the judiciary should not be able to determine the outcome is to suggest that the ability of the judiciary to adjudicate in disputes referred to it and then determine one way or the other what should happen should be taken away from the judiciary. Because if you take it away from them in electoral processes or matters, you may as well suggest that in all that contestations between individuals, that the court should not also take a decision. It should also refer the parties to start all over again. And I don't think that there will be an end. Because when you do a fresh election again, there's likelihood that there will be disputes again. So if you go to court and the court finds that there is reason, so you refer it to fresh election and you continue on and ad infinitum. And I think we should be much more concerned about our electoral process that produces outcomes that do not engender trust in the people. That allows things to so affect it that people go away shaking their head to say, look, the declared result does not reflect the will of the people. The UN Declaration of Human Rights says that election, the purpose of election is to enable people express their will as to their government, more like a referendum on the government, or between the individuals who have presented themselves. And when you suggest that either people should accept the outcome, whichever way it comes about, or that the judiciary should be incapable of putting an end to these disputes, is to me will create more confusion or lead to more uncertainty. If the parties, the government in power, the individuals, all major stakeholders, the electoral umpire, they will all do their work such that when the result is out, the loser will congratulate the winner. Then such a suggestion will be nice. But when we have a winner takes it all mentality where people want to win at all costs, those in power do not want those in opposition to rear their head, to be able to campaign freely. They ban your campaign work, they destroy your billboards. Then security agencies are in some cases deployed to pin down people, to make it difficult for people to live there. We make all manner of policy decisions. Then for so long people challenge the outcome of election. Let me stop first so that you ask your next question.
As you're speaking, my mind is going back to my days in secondary school where, you're given a math sum or something in mathematics, and the teacher is more interested in the workings rather than the results. Some people will say that what the ex-president has said is more about that the judiciary should be more involved in the workings rather than the outcomes, and he thinks that perhaps we should strengthen our electoral process more so that the outcomes will be more acceptable to the people. Can you really fault that? Let me come to you, sir.
Thank you, Magwe. I think I want to start by saying to a very large extent, I adopt the reasoning of my learned friend as advanced here this morning. And I want to say that I respect the person of former President Goodluck Jonathan. What he expressed was his personal opinion.
Indeed.
He is entitled to that and protected by the Constitution. Be that as it may, I want to pass that expression
that opinion so expressed as a bit unfortunate and to some extent misplaced, because what is suggested by implication means the declaration of candidates as winners should not be the constitutional prerogative of the courts. Indeed. It should be that of the electoral body itself. In a civilized clime like us, constitutionally, it is an aberration for one to be a judge in his own cause. INEC to conduct an election and to declare the winner, and that's the end. No, it is like taking us back to the Professor Iwu days.
No, so he hasn't said, and I'm not holding brief for the president, but I think if one were to be able to play an extended version of what he said that the courts should be able to, say the process, determine if the process was fair or not. If the process wasn't fair, he thinks the powers of the courts should stop at declaring a rerun rather than declaring a winner of the elections.
Yes. Before you declare or call for a rerun,
yes,
there must be a declaration of one being right and the other being correct. And who, as at today in Nigeria, has the prerogative to do that? For now, it is INEC. And it is wrong, in my very humble opinion, to put the cart before the horse.
Let me also ask you this, because you're a member of a political party, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Your party, and I think almost every party, does the APC, right? Or have you defected?
You know me more than I know myself. Oh, yes, go on.
Now, I'd like you to, is that correct?
Yes,
that is still correct,
yes, I am.
Right? Indeed. So, I mean, your party has held the short end of the stick in some cases where the court has declared elections in favor of another party. Your party has also benefited from courts being able to declare. I'll give you two quick examples. There was the situation in Bayelsa, where it wasn't even an electoral, well, maybe some people say it's an electoral matter. It was a matter of certificates. And that's how your party...
It's a pre-election matter.
Yes, where your party lost, the seat, the governorship seat. And then in Imo, yes, you held the long end of the stick, as it were. In both of these cases, do you think that the decision of the courts should have simply stopped with the process? What is your thinking?
I do not know what you mean by process. I want to say the process must produce a result. And it is the result of the process that is to be challenged or that is to be addressed. Now, I want certain impressions to be corrected. We have, despite our exposures, continually made mistakes. And the mistakes are such that we have not been able to separate the ought position, ought, O-U-G-H-T, position, from the is position. If we are able to separate that, you will agree with me that certain decisions of court are based on the is position. That is why, to a very large extent, the court, in giving its own opinions from the evidence before me, that is the is position. The odd position is almost always taken by even the non-lawyers or people who are not involved. It ought to have been this. At that point, the judiciary is accused by those who are non-lawyers. I am not saying that the judiciary is perfect. No, they are human beings. They cannot be perfect as such. But when we are able to draw this thin line, ought to in most cases is the moral aspect of it. It should have been this, but the court said it is this. So, for instance, the case of Imo, or the cases of Imo and that of Bayelsa, I think as a very senior lawyer, I must confess to you that by my training and background, I lack the locus to question, especially in a place like this, the decision of the apex court of the country. Because we are told, and I believe it at my level, I've been a lawyer of 36 years in practice. One of the definitions of law is, the law is what the judges say is a law. So we take it from that point of view. There must be reasons, whether right reasons or wrong reasons, because somebody must be hurt somewhere along the line. He may peddle a kind of explanation that will sound plausible in the eyes of some and otherwise. So I see completely the decision of the Supreme Court being right, since as at now, that's the last bus stop.
Well, that's your training as a lawyer. For the majority of people who go to the polls, they're not lawyers. And sometimes, you know, they will question whether or not their decision, their will as a people who went to the polls, stood under the sun, and went through the entire process, hasn't been usurped by the decisions of the court. Not because they didn't cast their ballot properly, but because perhaps somewhere along the line the process was flawed. Do you think that there could be room for remediation in the National Assembly, looking at how the laws have been, you know, enacted?
Well, our electoral laws have been amended, and the Constitution has been amended several times to improve on the electoral process. And it would appear that the more we have these amendments, the more litigations we have. But I think the topic for discussion today is the scope of the involvement of the judiciary in the electoral process. And we took a cue from the statement by former President Jonathan, where he suggested that the court should not be able to make a declaration. Now let me start by saying that the courts decide cases based on facts presented before them and what has been proven, and then they apply the law to them. So in appropriate cases, the courts actually do not make a declaration, they order a rerun, depending on what has been proved or what is in contention between the parties. If I give, for example, a case presented to the court is that from the votes cast, if they had collected the results properly, I ought to have been declared winner, not the other individual. And indeed, the court finds that from the totality of the votes cast, which were improperly collected, that Mr. B, who went to court, ought to be declared the winner, not Mr. A. Should the court order a rerun in that circumstance? So it is the facts that will determine what the court does.
Period.
If, for example...
So do you think, for instance, the courts, the order of the court could be different? I mean, I don't know.
Now, if I'm a judge,
yes,
and a man comes to me to say, from the votes cast in my own constituency, from the results sheets made available to all our agents, signed by everybody, I scored the majority of votes and met all the constitutional requirements to be declared winner. But the wrong person was declared winner. And the court finds as proved that this is the case. Don't you think it would be unfair for the court to order that a fresh election be held in light of the evidence which suggests that the man who has approached the court, the petitioner, ought to be declared the winner? So the facts must be applied to the decision of the court will be based on what is proven. I understand the worries of people that there seems to be over-judicialization of our electoral process. But the point has to be made that the politicians and the electoral process heap this blame on the doorsteps of the judiciary. If things are done properly, if the candidates do not employ the use of thugs to unleash violence, to snatch ballot boxes, to burn results, to prevent collation of results, the court will not be involved.
So,
and then sorry, let me just say this. And you talked about the people not feeling, even in the United States, the supporters of Trump, many of them still believe that that Trump won. So it's not always that how the people feel may actually be a reflection of what is, which is why I understand what you mean by the difference between ought and is. So there are some people that say we ought to have been declared winner, but we were not. But the reality may be that you were rightly not declared the winner. It depends on the facts and circumstances of the case. I'm sorry, I wanted to ask a question there.
Yeah, I was saying that perhaps the order of the court could be different. If, for instance, a candidate comes to court and says, you know, given the collation papers that we were given, or the election results, or the result sheets that we have, if you add this and add this and add this, we should be declared winner rightfully. And the court finds that to be so. Do you think, for instance, they could say, INEC, you know, use this particular result sheets and, you know, ensure that whoever should rightfully be declared winner is declared winner? Do you think that...
There's something we say in law, that there must be an end to litigation. You give room for people to mount further challenge. Then you ask yourself, of what use is a court which cannot make any positive decision? By telling INEC, do your work. No. And then a fresh round of litigation may ensue about, oh, you can't do it, go about doing it. And somebody may even try to start all over, assuming it was the Supreme Court that said this, or the Court of Appeal, if it's the last, the last court in that instance. Somebody may go back to a trial court and say, no, INEC was wrong, we were not invited, this was not done. It may never end. As much as I share the skepticism of people about the role the courts have played, because in some cases people feel that the court's decision did not reflect the will of the people, which is natural, which may not... so because of that, people do not want the court to be much involved. But to suggest that in all cases, the court should hands off, wash his hands like Pilate, and I say, INEC, you do your work. Do fresh election, compute and declare a winner. You know, that would be a recipe for inconclusiveness, institutional inconclusiveness, because we may never end. The court, as an adjudicator, must take a decision. People may not always like his decision, but the court must make that decision, as painful as it may be to those who lose in some circumstance. But we should work on strengthening our electoral process, our political culture, so that people will have confidence in it, so that people will accept the outcome of elections if they are properly conducted, so that the involvement of the courts will thereby be greatly reduced. And I'm sure the judiciary is not happy about the role they play. People have to be posted to different places to sit in tribunals away from their homes. The courts have to deliver judgments within 60 days at the Court of Appeal or filing of an appeal and the Supreme Court, and they're overworked. And it disrupts their normal judicial work, because since the constitution has placed a time frame, it means most other work has to be suspended so that they can attend to electoral matters. And it means commercial cases are not being treated, criminal matters are not being treated. And we want foreign direct investment, and we're emphasizing or giving priority to electoral matters. The court would also want to be seen that they do not delay in the disposal of these other cases, so that people have confidence that our judiciary is such that can give justice in all matters other than electoral matters.
Well, let's quickly flip this to Lagos now, where my colleagues have questions for you.
Well, let me begin with you, Maz Yosigwe. When you say that we need to strengthen the process, exactly what do you mean? Because what you have said has been said for as far back as I can remember. After every election, we've talked about having a conversation about around our electoral laws, around our electoral processes and all. The challenge people are having is, on the one hand, the people have spoken through the ballot paper, and on the other hand, the cases in court seemingly, just as you said a little while ago, upturn the position or the choice of the people, and then make the declaration, and it will seem like the choice of the people is relegated compared to the choice of the courts. But first, when you say we should strengthen the process, exactly what do you mean, and how do you think we should go about it?
Now, I talked about a political system and the electoral system. They all play a role. The political environment has a bearing on the outcome of an electoral process. Now, you talk about involvement of security agencies, the unwillingness of security agencies to apprehend people, or in cases, reported cases of security agents aiding electoral violence or electoral malpractices. Now, we talk about government in power, be it at the states or federal or local government level, not allowing the opposition to thrive or taking steps to frustrate other persons from participating in the process. Now, we talk about the integrity of the electoral process, ensuring that the votes count, ensuring that the ballot papers are not hijacked or from EC8, I think that's what it's called.
Yes.
The allegation that sometimes some parties have advanced copy of it and fill it in, and that what is submitted before the election, or that what is submitted is different. If you read some reported cases, you see both opponents submitting certified true copies of from EC8, purported from INEC, with different figures. We need to do so many things that will strengthen the system such that it will be transparent, so that the voting process will be such that when results are declared, people will go away knowing that that system has been tamper-proof, or such that whatever is the outcome of it is such that people cannot but accept the outcome. There are a whole lot of institutional things that can be done, which we may not have adequate time to discuss here, but which I believe Chief Utum, who has been part of the Electoral Reform Committee, has dealt extensively, may be better placed to talk about. But we have to strengthen the system so that issues of snatching of ballot boxes, I've seen an election being conducted in some countries and you don't see sign of any uniform security person in sight, and yet nobody makes any attempt to snatch anything, or to doctor results, or to tamper with the process. I don't know, but I think we can get to that point. But do we have the will to do it? Underage voting, intimidation of opponents, arrest and detention of persons, use of thugs, so many things. We all know it. So what can we do to make for a credible electoral process?
Yeah, but Mr. Sigwe,
talk about when I say strengthening the process.
We'll get the point about, we'll understand what you're saying about the process, but there are still cases or times that, you know, when you say justice must not be done, but to be seen to have been done. Because I think part of what some may glean from what the former president is saying, that even when those cases are in court, because that opinion which many now think, oh no, justice goes to the highest bidder when it comes to electoral cases. Because there are times wherein you see the mood. The people feel this is who we want. And then for perhaps based on technicalities or certain other such matters, cases are struck out. So in that scenario, can't it be said that perhaps those courts or the judges or whatever it is can wean themselves of that external influence and then, as much as possible, align with what the will of the people predominantly is? Can't that happen?
Chamberlain, I don't know whether you're suggesting that the court should go to the general public to have an opinion poll done to know what the people before giving a judgment. I don't know what that's you're suggesting. But if that's not what you're suggesting, let me take Bayelsa case for example. The law is that any candidate who has made a false declaration or presented a forged document to INEC shall be disqualified from standing as a candidate in that election. And there was an allegation that the deputy of in that election presented such documents, and the Federal High Court rendered a judgment before the election disqualifying him. It means that the APC, which ultimately won that election, had no validly nominated candidate, gubernatorial and deputy gubernatorial candidate. Now, the law simply is, it means that APC is not in the race, so all the votes that were cast for APC were more or less null and void. So should the court, because the will of the people as expressed in that election was a preference for the APC. Now, since this is a preference for APC, despite this legal disability, we should not declare any person winner and allow the Bayelsans to yet again have a bite at the election so that they will produce an APC candidate as winner.
Well, not
the law.
Okay, you know what? We'll come back to some of these matters and perhaps get Chief Utum to equally respond. That will be in just a moment. Please join us again. All right, welcome back. Let me ask you this, Mr. Sigwe. There was this, I think it was in March, where the retired Justice of the Supreme Court, Olabode Rhodes Vival, said many previous decisions of the Apex Court should be laid to rest and never followed. So he noted that there have been several occasions where that they were bound. I mean, this was just talking about some of those decisions that have been taken by the Supreme Court, how he didn't think it made any sense. That was a big headline at that time. So doesn't this lend credence to what many have been saying about those judges? Because I remember some politicians equally accused Judiciary of giving black market injunctions. And some of them even say, how do you give ex parte? You don't follow certain processes. So all of those things are all associated with the electoral process.
Chamberlain, I think the retired Honorable Justice Bode Rosevival is being quoted out of context. I recall he was talking about precedents. He emphasized the importance of following precedents, but said that where precedents are found not to meet the modern needs of the society, that the court should be able to depart from it. And I do not recall he was talking about the electoral process. Indeed, in his valedictory speech where he took that from, he said that with respect to conduct of election, that the burden should be placed on INEC to prove that the election was conducted in substantial compliance with the law. That's what he said. Now, when we talk about black market injunction, well, that is a term that unfortunately has crept into our whatever in the last few years, I think people use that to mean injunction that or orders of court that appear suspicious. Now, where it is proven that any person involved in the electoral process has been involved in bribe taking or corrupt practice, in some certain cases, is a criminal offense, and NJC has, in appropriate cases, taken actions against the judicial officers involved. But that is not to say that everybody who is involved in these electoral cases takes bribe. Such a suggestion should not be encouraged. It is also possible that because of the nature of politics, the way we play our politics, people sometimes also encourage these unfounded beliefs in order to discredit a process which has not favored them. It's only in Nigeria you see a man who has not scored up to 10% of the votes challenging the entire process and asking to be declared winner, even when it is obvious that by no stretch of imagination could he or she have imagined the winner. We should not bring down the house because some of the outcomes do not favor us. Well, I still insist that there is need for us to have some reforms, both political and electoral and institutional, to strengthen our electoral process. I do not think that it now calls for, or it justifies a call for the judiciary to be incapable of making a pronouncement one way or the other with respect to electoral disputes that have been presented to them. It does not justify the court simply saying, INEC do a fresh election, even in circumstances where it would be unfair for a fresh election to be ordered. The law does not respect any person, and sometimes the law, when applied to certain situations, may not be pleasing to the general public or the persons who may not have benefited from it. But that does not suggest that a corrupt act has been involved. Where you present a candidate who is not qualified, who has presented forged document, and that candidate is disqualified by the court, you live with the consequences of your action, because the parties are supposed to understand the onerous duty placed on them to ensure that those they put forward for an election have not presented forged candidates or are qualified to stand for that election in the first place. They're supposed to do some form of due diligence. You know, and where they fail to do so, and the court takes decisions against them and probably robs them of a victory they would ordinarily have enjoyed, they only have themselves to blame.
Right, Mr. Osego, you know, this is...
the judiciary as a whole...
Pardon me, this is fundamentally about the will of a people, right? And, I mean, when you say that punishing everybody as a result of just one person's sin, in quote, I'm not sure if that is fair enough. But let me take this back to Mr. Tumeteng and just build up again. This is fundamentally about the will of the people. The former president said that, well, I'm not sure he said that the court should be entirely removed from that process. He was just asking for a limit to what the court can do. I mean, thus far, no more, especially because it has to do with the will of the people. I mean, the people didn't just go out there to vote on that day for jamboree's sakes. They went to elect a leader, which is a fundamental of democracy. It's a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It didn't quite mention the judiciary or a select few in the judiciary. So in the light of the will of the people, if you could just go back to build that again, do you align with the former president saying, well, the court should be limited in that area?
Well, I'm sure the question is directed.
No, it's
me.
for you, actually.
I
Yes,
want to
please go
say
ahead.
that, you see, the will of the people is an elastic expression. Elastic in the sense that in the conduct of an election, several processes are taken into consideration. Even after one has been declared a winner, there are other areas the law has provided that has to be looked into by the other party to see if there was substantial compliance with that. You may score 100% of the votes, but there may not be substantial compliance with the rule of law as provided by the Electoral Act. In that kind of a situation, the people's mandate cannot take precedence over the rule of the court, over conditions placed by the court before one is finally declared. You see, the problem we have in this country is the attitude of Nigerians. It's our own attitude. For instance, before the Electoral Act 2010 and the subsequent amendments, it was a provision of the Electoral Act that wherever elections are to be conducted and a candidate files a document which is presumed not to be completely correct by the other side, that issue is raised before the electoral body, INEC. And INEC was given the legal authority, clearance, to look at it and disqualify the candidate. At least as Nigerians, because of our attitude, we can recall what then happened. How many persons were said to have been disqualified unjustly and they still went back to the same court to ask for the interpretation or explanation or protection of the court? The court will have to do that. If we talk about a process, for instance, I give you an example of a situation I personally took part in. When President Muhammad Buhari came on board as the president of this country, on the 4th of October 2016, he put forward a 24-man electoral constitution and electoral review or reform panel or committee, headed by no other person than the former president of the Senate, Ken Namani. And indeed, the question or the task before the committee was to look at the constitution and look at the electoral act and see how best elections can be conducted in the country. And this particular issue raised by the former president was raised in almost all the 6 geopolitical zones visited. And the answer, unanimous answer to a very large extent, was that, please, remove this responsibility from INEC. Let the courts, being the hope of the common man, decide whoever is properly elected. It would be a terrible invitation to chaos if we allow it at large.
Well, Mr. Eteng, if I could just come in here.
Yes.
I just want to be sure, in trying to solve a problem, don't you think we're creating one? But first, let me try to get more insight on that. So you're saying that if people go to vote, for example, INEC conducts an election, people troop out en masse and they vote for a candidate, and it's clear who the winner is at the end of the day. Are you saying that INEC should then take that result to the court for the court to look through it and say, well, it followed due process, so you can announce the winner, or the court should announce the winner? But what exactly?
God forbid, I should not be understood saying that. What I have in mind, and which of course is applicable, is one scores 100% of the votes. That's correct. 100% of the votes. That makes him ahead of his opponent. I am saying that that is not the end of the matter. That cannot be the end of the matter. If, for instance, take the Bayelsa case as an example. If at the end of the day, with the 100% votes cast, being the will of the people. The will of the people is subject to the rule of law. And it is shown, like it was shown in Bayelsa, that, oh, the man we have given 100% of our votes did not get even elementary 6 or school certificate as required by the Constitution. And it is so proven there is no court of law that will shut its eyes and say the people have spoken. The
Is it
people
the
must
will?
speak in accordance with the provisions of the law.
Pardon me, is it the
They
will
cannot
of the
speak in
people?
vacuum.
Is it the will of the people that should be
Yes.
subject to the rule of law, or the conduct and the process that should be subject to the rule of law? Because the will of the people is the will of the people. I want this person to be my leader. I shouldn't have to subject that to a constitution, for example. So isn't it the process that brings about that leader, the build-up, that should be subject to the rule of law?
The process has to be complete. It has to be complete in the sense that if you come out to want to vie for a position, the law presupposes that you will be qualified, you will be a Nigerian citizen or whatever. And if out of ignorance or oversight, deliberate sometimes, one suppresses information about his qualification. That's a process. And the process is that if at the end of the day you are able to establish that information has been suppressed as to the age of the winner who has gotten the votes, which is the will of the people, and that is challenged, the court is bound to look at that and be satisfied that he got or he did not get the qualifying factors right before he was elected.
Well, Mr. Ten, let me
I am making.
Okay, now let me come at you with this one, or perhaps rephrase or take a look at the same question Kade asked from another light. There are 4 critical elements in the process we are talking about here. The last of them being the courts. The first is the political party, then the people, then INEC. No, beg you. The political party, then INEC, then the people, then the courts. At the beginning of it all is the political party that fields candidates. So when you say the process concluding itself, perhaps you should look at the beginning of the process. Because it is the political party that, for want of a better word, erroneously fields a candidate that is not qualified in the first place. Consequently, the conclusion of the process cannot be clean, because just as you have cited, if the political party fielded a candidate that was not qualified in the first place, we have already set up the judiciary, as Mr. Osigwe said the other time, to intervene in the matter. So shouldn't we be looking at the process from the perspective or from the responsibility of the political parties themselves, who literally set up, if we can use the term, the judiciary for the end of the process?
Well, that is correct, but what you have to understand is, if a political party knowingly and willingly conceal information about a candidate it's fielding for an election, if at the end of the day that candidate wins and these facts come to the public line and there is a challenge, if the court declares the candidate fielded by the party who has won, scored the highest number of votes, as declares him as one who is not properly elected because he did not fulfill all the requirements required by law, the political party suffers. You are a Nigerian, we are all Nigerians. We know people suppress a lot of information. People suppress information even against their wives. And when this comes to the public domain, one is helpless. I have a personal experience that I didn't even know, without mentioning name, that the friend have been calling lawyer was not even a lawyer. He was arguing cases in court like a lawyer. Arguing cases and winning some cases in court. But the process of becoming a lawyer was exposed to be faulty. He was exposed to be faulty. That he was not qualified to be admitted in the university. And you see, he has won cases. He has practiced law for some time. And I've joined those who didn't know to call him my senior, my senior, my senior. But he failed when the truth came to light. It is a process of becoming a lawyer that was challenged, and that dropped him of that. It's the same thing in the election.
Exactly. So then, Mr. Ten, can we say specifically that it is the political parties that invite the judiciary into the process because of the faulty process that they initiate in the first place?
The party cannot invite the judiciary knowingly into the process when they are aware that the candidate fielded by them, by the party, lacks what it takes to be a candidate. It is not the party, strictly speaking. But one could say it is the candidate who has been declared the loser by the court who actually brought about the problem that eventually threw him out. Because you know yourself. You see, we know ourselves. No matter how we pretend, we know ourselves. We know our shortcomings. But sometimes, due to certain circumstances and influence, we could suppress certain things. And when those things are suppressed, at the end of the day, they come out to be known by others. You see how we try to hide and take the shame. And take the shame. It's not the political party. The party must work upon the information given to him, because such information is given on oath. And when equally, information given on oath is discovered not to be correct.
Well, Mr. Tang, let me ask...
the candidate must...
Yeah, we'll get your point to that. Let me bring Mr. Osigwe on this one, because, I mean, we were speaking earlier about comments attributed to retired Honorable Justice Rhodes Vival. Well, in the same breath, he equally did say that most elections are often resolved by courts simply because most politicians are never satisfied with the results announced by the regulatory body charged with the conduct of elections, which is INEC. And then he then spoke about a case which delivered in 2016. That was an election dispute involving, it was a governorship election dispute. And he said, a careful reading and understanding of deciding authorities would show that a petitioner had an uphill task proving his petition in accordance with the Electoral Act. He therefore recommended the Electoral Act should be amended to shift the burden of proof to INEC to prove that he conducted a fair and reasonable elections. Isn't this part of what the former president is talking about in terms of the limitations of how the courts can go about electoral matters, so that it really be seen that they are not unnecessarily, as it were, interfering?
No, Chamberlain, I still beg to differ. That's not what he meant. He was trying, the Honorable Justice Rhodes Vival in that statement was trying to say that the petitioner has an uphill task. If you read a number of the decisions, if you present your, for example, your state collation officer or local government collation officer or senatorial, they said, questions you put to him, were you in the polling unit? In other words, suggesting that whatever he may have said was hearsay. Sometimes you tender documents and they say you cannot speak to these documents because you are not the author. So there are differences. So what he was trying to say is that even in cases where it looks as if the complaints have basis, the person who is complaining has a difficulty in proving them. Permit me to digress a bit to address an issue, question raised by Kayode and your other colleague, when you are talking about the will of the people and the involvement of the court. Let me make this point. Candidates are sponsored by political parties. And in situations where they may have been fraud or forgery by a candidate, the party is as much a victim of that fraud as the public that may have reposed confidence in that individual by giving him the majority votes. Because parties screen their candidates. And this individual must have used this kind, because if the party had discovered at the screening stage that these documents were forged, the party would not have shielded him. So the party is also the victim, as much as those who voted for them. And the public, or the people who express their will by voting for an individual who may have used violence or who may have forged documents to secure victory in an election, will stand or fall with him. And if there be any legal impediment attached to him, it destroys the will of the people expressed in the votes that gave him victory.
Sure.
It's not sentiments. So if the man ought not to run, he's not legally qualified, and he doctored his age. For example, let's talk about Salisu Buhari in 1999, who had to doctor his age to qualify to run for House of Reps and ultimately emerged Speaker. Will it be right to now argue that because the members of his constituency expressed their will by electing him to the House of Representatives, then it overtakes the law? He should be allowed to remain there because he's the person the people wanted, notwithstanding that he was not legally qualified to be there. So the will of the people is necessarily circumscribed by the facts, circumstances, and the law applicable to the facts of to the individual or the circumstance of his victory. So if the victory is truncated by one thing or the other, the will fall. And we can't keep insisting on this will as if it is an immutable thing, standing on its own and cannot be moved by anything. If there's a legal disability, it takes away the basis of the expression of the will of the people. It crumbles. It can't stand.
Practically speaking now, I'd like us to look at the practicability of some of the judgments. So you have an election, right, that two people contested for or more, and a majority voted for a certain person. Imagine 80% of the voting population, which by extension might signify that 80% of the whole population actually went for that candidate. And, you know, the process went on, a winner was declared, and in court it was overturned, and the victory was given to the person who got 20% of the votes, meaning that, I mean, he's the candidate of 20% of the population by extrapolation, if we could just use that statistical expression. So the practicability is the fact that he is someone who was chosen by 20%. Clearly, the majority of the populace did not want him to be the leader. So in terms of practicability, don't you think the court should still somewhat rely on some form of, you know, the will of the people? I mean, you have jurists, for example, having to decide who was guilty or not. So don't you think the judge or the judiciary should still have something in place that still reflects the will of the people eventually when those judgments are given?
Well, let me...
So Sigwe first, then we can get you to respond.
20%. The 20% is a majority votes in that circumstance. The 80% votes are nullified.
Wasted votes.
Wasted votes. They are not. In every election, what is used to declare a winner is
valid votes.
Valid votes. Votes said to be lawfully cast.
For a valid candidate.
Sorry, I'm still trying to wrap my head. Pardon me. I'm still trying to wrap my head around
could have
calling
80%.
Pardon me. I mean, it's the wasted votes part, because these people went out to select a leader. I mean, so how is it wasted? Because I don't seem to understand. Is that fair?
The issue of fair or otherwise is subject of law. What is fair in law may be unfair to an ordinary man.
Absolutely.
I want you to understand that. The law says you will score a greater percentage of the lawful votes cast. There is no election petition you read that this clause is not expressed there. I scored this percentage of the lawful votes. This man who has scored 80% of the votes is per se not qualified. If you are not qualified, whatever vote is placed on your head will collapse like a pack of cards.
So let me ask you then,
Yes.
let me take it from here and ask you, at what point would you say that we have gotten to the situation of the United States where when electoral cases are referred to the courts, the courts will decline and say no, go back to the ballot box, go back to where the will of the people was expressed. At what point will we get there in Nigeria?
Well, it depends on what was referred to the courts. The court cannot create an imaginary situation. It depends on what is put. Equally, in Nigeria today, you can come to court, and the court, looking at all what is presented before it, especially in a governorship or presidential election, where the issue of spread is one of the qualifying factors to become a governor or a president. If Mr. B has been disqualified, but even at that, the votes that are on ground are not enough to meet the constitutional requirements, no, you would not be declared a governor. You will go back. The court will say, please, a re-election has to be conducted. This time, not with the man who scored the highest number of votes, but with the man who came next to you. So that's what it is. The law has put, the Electoral Act has defined all of this completely. It's just that, like what I said from the beginning.
Well, let me quickly allow...
the very day we separate ought from is.
Yes.
Look at it right.
Let me quickly allow Mazi, give his last words on this, because time is fast spent. I don't know, do you want to quickly comment on, because now those were your first comments, that we're not yet there. At what point will you say that we will get there, or we are finally there, where the electoral culture has taken over in such a way that we don't see the courts as a place to go to?
Yeah, it starts from ensuring that there's internal democracy in parties, that the process of emerging as candidates of political parties is such that will not give rise to litigation, that the political climate or system and culture is such that respects the rule of law and ensures that the requisite environment is put in place for the conduct of an election, and that the election itself is not in any way carried out in a manner as to rob it of the integrity or trust of the people, so that when an election is now conducted, the people will have confidence and they believe that the outcome of this electoral process reflects the will of the people, and then the candidates who lose will accept the outcome as being the legitimate outcome of the process. When we get to that point, the courts will now have little or no role to play in the matter.
Well, I guess that's where we're hoping we will head to. We hope that that's where we'll be headed. But I believe that this conversation will be ongoing, something that could also take the time of maybe those looking at the election, the Constitution Amendment, and maybe even in the National Assembly. But we have to thank you both for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Mazi Afamosigwe is the Senior Advocate of Nigeria and former General Secretary of the Nigeria Bar Association. And we also had Chief Utum Eteng, who is a former member of Presidential Committee on Constitution and Electoral Review, and also a member of the All Progressives Congress. Well, that's it for this segment. We'll come back now and we'll be talking about state of the nation. Please stay with us. Well, Mr. Eni Akinshola joins us now. He's a media practitioner and advisor and lead publicity executive at Agogo Publishers. You're welcome once again to Sunrise Daily.
My pleasure always. Thank you. Good morning. Good
morning. Well, let's start with this last matter now. They were both lawyers, so maybe their perspective was a bit different. You're a journalist, and I don't want to say we tend to feel the pulse of the people more before the politicians come after us. But what are your thoughts on this? I mean, looking at the submissions of the gentlemen and also feeling the pulse of the people.
I miss a lot of the discussions. But what I got to, the point I got to, first and foremost, was the point on the courts being prevented from installing elected officials. I think so. The courts should only have their go before elections. Before the people take the final decision, the courts should have been given the opportunity to exhaust itself. Once the people vote, according to the law, then it won't be right to allow the courts to overturn such elections. And if there are compelling information, evidence for the court to upturn, then it must go back to the people for re-election, not to ask A, who ordinarily did not get the mandate of the people to stand in. But all of this cannot work under the presidentiality. We must rework the constitution. We must rework our laws. Our laws are the fundamental. They are the problems with us. The way our laws were configured, the ways they were made, there is no confidence in the law. There is no ownership in our country and in our law. We all feel that it is theirs, not ours. And until we sit down and talk and own this country. I was born into Nigeria. I was born, I grew up to know that I'm a Nigerian. I would love that to remain. I would love that to continue. But I feel dangerously aggrieved. I feel that the future of my children are in danger. Everybody feels that. But I do not feel that the way to do is to destroy Nigeria. I feel that we must rework it. But where the problem is that some people say there is nothing to discuss about Nigeria. That's where the problem. We have two groups, two extremes. Those who say we are breaking down this Leviathan, we are destroying Nigeria, we want to go into our different communities and nations. And those who say, no, Nigeria is good as it is, we cannot talk about it. These are two dangerous extremes. There is nothing too sacrosanct to be discussed about Nigeria. We need to break it down and then agree. I also believe that if we break it down and agree, then the fact that I want to go Dudu, I want to go Biafra, I want to go Arewa will be removed. But unless and until we do that, these questions will come. Insecurity will be a regular problem. So
legitimacy is what, because at the core of this discussion is legitimacy.
Yeah.
When the former president talked about this, and he was saying that the court should just stop short. They can look into the process, but if they find that the process is irregular, what they should just be able to order is a rerun. A rerun.
Yeah.
But the lawyers who have just left here believe that there will be no end to the agitations. There will be no end to litigation, so to speak.
Once the ground norm is right, once the law is correct, there is a finality to the legal process. And the earlier the finality is determined before swearing in. Look, it's a process that ought to end before we do any other thing. That process ought to end before we talk about swearing in. So if we have to rework our law to make sure that every other thing is done quite early, we have to. But where, for instance, the final qualification comes a week to election. For instance, and I'm saying, I'm not using your platform to advertise, I'm a year older today. Oh. Everybody who knew me from primary one knew that I am a year older today.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much. So it won't be possible for me to come out tomorrow to say that I am 49. A lot of people say, wow, this is not true. So we must clear all those things ahead of election. Nobody should be debating the certificate of any person a week to election, for God's sake. Those things ought to have been cleared eons ago. Nobody should be talking about qualification order. The ultimate qualification we want to talk about on election is the qualification that the people, through their thumbs, put upon the candidate. That should be the in thing on election day. But here, we are still talking about his state of origin, his nationality, his date of birth, his certificate, whether it's NEPA bill or whatever, on the day, a week, 2 weeks to election.
But to be clear, we're not blaming the judiciary for this.
I do know.
Are you blaming them?
No.
For getting involved in...
No, I'm not blaming. That's why I say it's the law. It's the law. And you see, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, with the right resources, can access the law. Legitimately or illegitimately. It's just like the media. It's been so democratized that anybody can go on social media, they do a video and say, so is a thief. Since the burden of proof is not on him, society takes his word for who he is and move on. Some years ago, we had people saying a sitting president is the founder of so and so, and people believed and spreading the rumor. Society cannot go on. If you assert, you must prove. If you allege, you must authenticate. So I do not blame the judiciary for, if people did not bring cases to the courts, would the courts just generate cases on their own? No. So it's the law. It's our law. It's the way we are configured as a nation. There is distrust. There is that legitimacy problem about Nigeria. I said, if you take Nigerians, up to 50% do not believe in Nigeria. Because they do not own Nigeria. They do not see it as my country. And why? Because they do not feel part of it. They feel they are alienated, marginalized in their own country. We must get that first and foremost.
Well, one of the areas where, we're still struggling, it's a big challenge right now, is security. It's back on the front burner. This time around, I mean, since last time you were here, a lot of things have happened on the front of security. We saw the assaults, the attacks that happened in Imo last week. The police headquarters was burnt. We saw a jailbreak. People were let out of the prison, over 1,800 people at the last count. And then over the weekend, just as the weekend was approaching, we saw the formation, the Southeast governors coming up with their own security outfit, Ibubeago. And there have been questions. So only recently, I think just yesterday, they said they're going to come up with a legal backing for this particular outfit. It has taken a while, because there was a time when it would seem that was a trend. When Motekun was mooted in the Southwest, we saw a meeting of the Southeast governors and even some of the South governors, but it would seem that somehow the conversation there just took the back burner when the police kept on talking about community policing. I remember there was a conversation with the former IGP who went to the Southeast, and there was some controversy around what the idea of community policing the police was going to be about. But yesterday, or a few days ago, they finally put, a name to it. They have finally come up with their own outfit. How do you think, I mean, with your knowledge of what is happening in the Southeast, and also the peculiar challenges they have in the Southeast, how do you think that this organization is going to function?
Such mutations will continue. We'll have such micro security networks coming up everywhere. Is
that micro? It's a macro.
It's macro now. I say it will become micro eventually. You see, already it's happening. You have your own security guard at home. There is a security committee on the street. There is a zonal security group. It will continue that way because there is no ownership. That is, my sister, it will appear too simplistic.
There's no ownership of what?
Just hold. Even the security, that's where I'm going. The police do not believe that you are part of them. You rather trust a man who had no security training to be your gate man than to allow a policeman. Why? Why? So it's an issue and each time people say, look, that things are going on well. No! We'll continue like that. Let me tell you where I think the Southeast governors felt that, look, we must do something. The circumstances of the jail incidents in Imo, talked about military formations, police formations, government house around the prison. And we were told that they operated for upward of 2-3 hours. Nobody intervened. So people felt there must be something to it. And is that not suspicious? It is. If people shot for hours in a location and an army formation was some few minutes away, police formation few minutes away, government house few minutes ago, and nothing happened, nobody apprehended, nobody intervened, something is fundamentally wrong.
Not that they were overpowered.
Not that there was no attempt to intervene. From what I have read, from what I have seen, except you have a contrary opinion. That means something dangerous happened. Across Nigeria, bandits, terrorists will run over communities, sack residents, take ownership, build houses, nobody will intervene. Something is fundamentally wrong. That cannot be ordinary. So you expect the next community to sit down and not form their Ibubeagu or their Amotekun? You are joking. There is a saying, once the war pursues you to your doorstep, what do? You turn your back and fight. There's nowhere to run to once you are pushed to your wall. So societies, people, communities are pushed to the wall. They are taking action, precipitate action, some unjust action, some taking the laws into their hands because the law has refused to take consideration of their security, their safety. So they're subverting the law in order to keep safe. And that's why I say until we sit down, look, there is no crime in unveiling everything and rebuilding. There is no crime. our so-called unity was foisted upon us by the colonialists. Can't we, for God's sake, rework our unity? Is it too much to ask for?
Some people say, you know, because I don't know if what you're suggesting is another constitutional conference.
Call it by any name. But
there are those who say that, you know, what we actually need is a conversation, but it doesn't have to be a constitutional conference.
Okay. A conversation towards what purpose? A conversation towards to achieve what? If there are no positive, clear design changes to the constitution, to the grand norm, after the discussion, we are going nowhere. For instance, there is something called federal character. Federal character means that qualified or not qualified, if we are taking 12 people in a place, we must have from all other places. It doesn't merit is thrown into the dustbin. No society runs like that. No society runs like that. You want to go into your child.
Is that not how we've chosen to interpret it? The federal character did not say we need to throw merit away.
But that is what it means.
He didn't say we should do it to the detriment of merit.
That is what it means. If there is nobody qualified from my state for that position, what do? You close it for me? No, it means throw it away. That's it. That's the ramifying effect of that. That's what it interprets to. That is what it translates to. Your child wants to go to primary or secondary school. Somebody with 200 marks will not be qualified. Somebody with 10 marks will be qualified. No society runs like that. You create monsters out of everybody. Why not let us sit down? Let us remove these basic things, these lies that surround us. If you have a problem of arrested development in your own children, then let us create special training processes that will make your own children to grow up so fast. We pay particular attention to it. If somebody is, that's why you have the Paralympics, for God's sake. And this is not to demean anybody. The Paralympics are those who are challenged physically to run their own races with their peers. And those who, for instance, like Pistorius, could gain the use of their could eliminate their disabilities, are allowed to compete. You cannot make a physically, mentally challenged person to come and study with somebody who has all his mental acuity in place. Society we must. So it is not, I can't be a swimmer if I've never swum in my life. I have to be trained. I took these simple examples because that is the real problem. Small things. Until we have confidence in our nation, until I believe that my failure will not be because I didn't put it my best. My failure will be because I didn't put in my best. It will be because I didn't put my best. Not because there is one law that prevents me from getting there, but allows somebody else to get there. I won't feel bitter. We are running a race. You tie my 2 hands behind my back and you want me to run equally with somebody with 2 hands free. So these are realities. You take oil from some people's land, and they have to fight tooth and nail to get to the top of the hierarchy of the agency that runs the oil. It doesn't work that way. These are things, the dysfunctionalities that create insecurity, that create fear, that creates marginalization, and translates to, look, if it doesn't work, then let us break it.
So let us start from the solutions. If you're saying that we need to talk, we have spoken before. We've spoken many times.
Yes.
And the latest time we knew we spoke was 2014. The reports of the conversation in 2014, they are still there. I
just said some minutes ago, somebody said, let's have a conversation. I said, for what purpose? If the purpose is not to effect the changes that we desire, talking will not work. I said that some minutes ago. Yes, if we had that report, what stops us from implementing those salient points that we all agreed on? Okay, there are issues with those salient. Let some other group look at it, or look at them and say, yes, on community police, let us begin to work on it. 2, on quota system, let us begin to work on it. 3, on population, let us begin to work on it. 4, on this, let us begin to work on it. But another team comes in, that one is dead. There is nothing good from that. And do something new. No. We can't talk about Nigeria. Our unity is so sacrosanct. But we cannot debate it.
The leadership of the country hasn't said that. the government of
There is a difference between what you have said and what you
has
have done. What they have done is to say that we can't talk about it. I'm sorry, and this is...
No, what they have said is that all the conversations that need to take place should take place in the National Assembly. They believe that's where the conversation should start. And we know that at the beginning of every assembly, the National Assembly takes it upon itself to do a constitution amendment. In other words, trying to take in some of those those sore areas which we think we should have a conversation about into consideration with a constitution amendment. Why is it difficult to talk about, why is it difficult to bring these issues that are contentious into the constitution amendment committee? What they have said is just
what you have said. What they have done is different. Okay. What they have done is this. The majority of members of the National Assembly belong to one party. So they have this opportunity to just go ahead and make these changes with little or no opposition from anybody. But this is what they are doing.
No, that's not what happened.
I said what they have said is different what they are doing.
No.
They are dragging, I must say this. What have they done to put effect to these things that we have agreed on? Now let us maybe educate me.
No, when you say that members of the National Assembly, majority of them belong to one party, it is true at the national level. But to effect a constitution amendment, you need 2/3 of state assemblies, which might not necessarily be in the same party with that of the national level.
What have been thrown from the National Assembly to the states in all these salient things that we have? Which of these issues? That's the point. None of these major issues have been thrown back to the National Assembly. So there's a big difference between saying, yes, we want to do it.
Thrown back to the National Assembly by who?
You said you will need, I'm taking you up from where you started. You will need the State Assembly to ratify whatever decision is reached or agreed on at the National Assembly. Okay, what are the salient issues that the National Assembly have worked on that now needs the concurrence of the state assemblies?
No, they are still taking up the issues that will be amended.
Okay, so we'll wait for another 8 years to get that one done. We are in an emergency, except we don't realize, except we do not want to accept it. I am saying that there is a big difference between the rhetoric of those in government and what they want to do. I said this, and I said this the other time I was here. The configuration of the National Assembly is such that their class structure will not allow any speedy action. The circumstances that brought them into power will not allow them to fundamentally change the Leviathan. So it's once you do not know why you are here, you can't get out of where you are.
You know, but
they are taking it to this. They are I'm sorry. They are comfortable with the reality as we are. They are too comfortable.
There are some, well, maybe not all of them. There are those who will also say that, even among those who have agitated for a restructuring for so long, there was a time when it seemed like as if, a lot of people have been asking for restructuring, and it looked like we're eventually going to get it. Then we now heard voices saying, look, let us beware, because the fact that you're asking for restructuring and it looks like it's about to be delivered doesn't mean that will answer all of the questions that you're seeking for and will deliver the immediate dividends of democracy which we all seem to be looking for. And there are some basic things we just need, sincerity of mind and heart. Let's take, for instance, doctor strike. Only recently they called up their strike. They've given a 4-week period within which they said they will review. This is not the first time they're going on strike. Some people will say, if we're meeting them with sincerity of heart in the first place, why would our doctors be going on strike so frequently? Is that to do with restructuring as well?
The character and the content of those in government determines this. We have an agreement. Yours is to implement that agreement. You do not implement that agreement. You're supposed to go and sleep. No, it doesn't work that way. Look at the ASU thing. It has been on for decades, yet these fine points have not been executed up to today. So I say, until we understand the enormity of our problems, we'll begin to paper over it. And rather, it's like a sore. Rather than heal, it will fester. It will become gangrenous. So that is where we are in. It's the ASU thing has been on and on. ASU must go back. They go back. The next government comes in. They engage them. Please let them go back for the sake of our children. They go back and we go on. Now it's doctors. We've had doctor strike before. Issues that were agreed on were not totally implemented.
Oh, I forgot to add. Yes, you talked about ASUP. ASUP is also there. Association of Academic Staff Union of Polytechnics.
I do not know all. But if I were in government, and knowing that we have this history of this strike, the first thing I would do is set up a committee with ASUP, all the stakeholders in education. Table before them what I think we want to do. Let them revisit it. Let us agree and begin to implement. But the government comes in a year, 2 years, nothing. He will not revisit what had existed. He will not do things that had been agreed upon. Then those ones say, look, we have waited 2 years, 3 years.
The point is this. We don't need a constitutional reform conference to be able to resolve some of these things.
No, I have said this. I've said it. There are things we could do from what has been agreed on. And that's why I say, look, there's a difference between agreeing. The essence of constitutional talking is to act on what is agreed on. That's the essence. If, for instance, this government came in and started implementing the fine points that were agreed on by previous government, it would be difficult for anybody to go back to those things and say, let's start agitating for them. That's what I mean. But we are not doing anything about the SAW. Yet we want magic to happen. It's either we take the SAW, open it fully, and treat it effectively. Know the root cause. Why is this SAW festering? Or at least treat it so that it won't fester. But we're doing neither of both. We are hitting that same SAW on hard surfaces. We are creating
who should take leadership right now?
Leadership.
Who should actually take leadership for the conversation which you think should happen?
It starts, I'm afraid to say, it starts from the president.
Okay.
It starts from the president or the presidency, the National Assembly, the governors, like that. A governor might try what he could, but see, the man who calls the shot in Nigeria is the president.
Well, I think it's a fine place to leave it. See where you...
And sadly, we are with the president that we are with for now, till the end of this term.
It's a fine place to leave it. We have to thank you for coming on Sunrise Today this morning. Mr. Eni Akinshola is a media practitioner and an advisor, and also lead publicity executive at Agogo Publishers. We see a few of your comments already. They're coming in already. Akol Modu, talking about the people and their ballot, says, people matter in a democracy. People's voices should be heard via the ballot during periodic elections. If candidates feel unsatisfied with the electoral process, the way to go is the courts. The courts settle disputes. Sometimes courts give out wrong decisions. Well, I guess the battle between Ot and East will be on for a while. Well, thank you so much, Akol Modu.
Well, I guess that's where a number of people are having issues. Henry says about the same issue, the contestation with judicial intervention is the advancement of technicalities over naked truth. Again, Ot and East. That INEC was disallowed in owning the result sheets in the Imo case is a rape of justice. What exactly do the courts represent? What is justice? I guess we have to go to the law school for that.
So that will imply that sometimes the truth is clothes. So you need to undress the truth as it seems. But take a look at this one from Tunde Banjoko. Strengthening the electoral process says to strengthen the system, that's the electoral system, regulate the pay and make it less attractive to political entrepreneurs. So only those who wish to serve will contest. Then we will have less thuggery and contention on results. Political entrepreneurs. That's interesting.
Oh dear. Look at this one from Emmanuel White. He says the former president's suggestion should not be swept under the carpet by the judiciary using technicalities. Take the Supreme Court decision on the Imo election, for instance, where the fourth candidate was declared winner.
Professor Nakena, the courts and elections, for our courts to function properly, the government must do its part to allow NJC to appoint honorable men to forestall infectious and scurrilous gripes, allow for financial autonomy for it to appropriately discharge its duties, and avoid systemic corruption.
And this one by Victor Orwell. The laws are the main tools of our flawed electoral processes. This status must change. One cannot use a basket to fetch water from the stream. Christ.
Okay, so you know what we decided to do, since this whole matter is out there being talked about so much. So we decided to put up a poll so that let's get your voices heard on this matter. So take a look at that. That is the question today. Should we limit the role of the courts in deciding who the winner of an election is? So look at those options there. Yes, no, doesn't matter, other. You know, for those of you who say, you didn't capture my opinion or my perspective, that other fourth option is for you. So while you do that, you can also comment if you want. I mean, it's a free country.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, opinions are free, as they say. So you can always go ahead and do that. So just go ahead and vote. Let's see what you think on this matter. So
I see the results are changing.
So
call us the
right?
empire in this case, right?
Oh, yeah, so there you go. That is a live one. And I wonder what happens if we shift the burden of proof to INEC.
That'll be a major game
Isn't
changer.
that the counsel of the Honorable Justice?
Yeah, that's what he's suggesting. So you can imagine if that were to happen. So if anybody is approaching INEC to manipulate elections, if INEC feels, look, we can't defend this thing, it will fall flat on its face before the law. So they'll just throw their hands up in the air, hands up. And then who knows? But you know, it could be wrong because people will always find a lacuna in some of these things.
Oh, yes.
But some think it will be a lot easier for anyone to say, INEC, prove that you conducted, there was substantial compliance the way you did this thing. So, Michael, what do you think about that?
Well, I do know that this, even though you see the lawyers being gentlemen, very gentlemanly about some of these matters, you might see the National Assembly being besieged by protests from right, middle, left, center, those who will agree and those who will say, no, you cannot stand the law on his head. Those who say, you know, he who asserts must prove.
Yeah.
And you cannot just shift the question when it comes to electoral matters. Let us see if ever that conversation comes up, what the reactions would be. But I do know that that would not pass easily. It will be easier for a camel to go through that of a needle, as they say, than for that to pass. But I think that substantially, it could help with matters of justice. Well, that's why we have to leave the conversation this morning. You could get your voice heard. Let us, you know, hear from you. Send us a mail or, you know, tweet at us with on our Sunrise Daily platform. So with a Twitter handle on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
And yes, you can vote as well. I'm Kayode Kikule.
94 votes already. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.
I'm Chamberlain, so I will see you tomorrow.